Alrighty, so my name is Christian, and before this video starts, I do want to apologize because it is going to be unedited and unprofessional, basically, just because I have not been doing YouTube for that long. I've only made like 3 videos, so I don't really know how to edit yet or anything like that. So this is going to be just raw footage, and I do apologize if I do ramble or go on for a point longer than I wanted to. So this video is just a ranking from worst to best in terms of albums that I have listened to this year. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the albums that I listen to are from artists that I already find interesting or that I already have listened to before. So there are a lot of maybe underground artists and albums that have flown under my radar that I might need to check out, but I just don't know about yet. So, starting at the very bottom of the list, with a 5 out of 10, which for me is pretty damn bad, is Folklore by Taylor Swift. And this is just extremely disappointing for me because Taylor Swift is one of my all-time favorite musicians. I believe she has an extraordinary amount of talent when it comes to vocal range, the instrumentals of her songs, the songwriting, and just the overall tone and sound of her music. I believe that she has a very professional grade to it, and she found kind of her niche, and she's been doing it for the past few years, like that kind of upbeat poppy sound. And I know that artists can kind of detour from their preferred genre or their expert genre. But in this case, it just did not work for me. I've seen that for a lot of other people. It has, apparently, because this is being regarded as her best album of all time, which I significantly disagree with. But again, that's just my take. And it's very disappointing for me because this album both starts and ends phenomenally. Like, amazing. The first couple songs are great. And the song Exile with Bon Iver is hands down my favorite song that she has ever recorded and put out. And that includes Love Story, You Belong With Me, all the classics. I believe that song, Exile, is the best song that she has ever recorded. So after hearing those first few songs that were just phenomenal, the album just stagnates and just stays just monotone and just uninteresting. And it's really frustrating because she, to me at least, has a lot of talent, and I feel like that it went severely underutilized in this project. And I feel like, for me, she should get back to doing her pop music. Lover, her last album she put out, is my favorite album that she's ever done, just because I think that album perfectly captured her, bright and bubbly personality, and I feel like that's what she's really good at. So I personally didn't really like the album, but then again, there are a lot of other people that are just now getting into her music because of this album. And if that's you, I'm glad, I'm happy for you, because honestly, I do believe that more people should be listening to her music, but just for me, this album was not good. Next is Dark Lane Demo Tapes by none other than Drake. I hate Drake. I hate him, to say the least. I believe he's just not talented, and his past like 4 or 5 albums have just been utter garbage, and I have not even been able to finish them because they don't appeal to me. Every single song by him sounds the same, and he's just not a great rap artist. Now, I give this album a 6 out of 10 just because there are a few songs that are actually pretty darn good and that I have actually added to my playlist, but for the most part it's just boring and uninteresting songs with trap beats. And it's just Drake doing what he does, and it's just uninteresting beyond belief to me at this point. Next up is Eternal Atake by Lil Uzi Vert. I actually really like Lil Uzi Vert. I think that he's a great artist when it comes to energy, not so much for his lyrics. But this album was just too long for me. And although I know that it's been like 4 years since he dropped his last album, so there were going to be a lot of songs on here, I thought it was too long and just had too many songs for filler, and it just took away from the experience for me. Next up, we have 1999 by Rich Brian. Rich Brian is honestly one of my favorite rappers right now. I think that he is up and coming, and if he puts out more rap projects like he did with The Sailor, his previous album before this one, then he's destined to be one of the greats, just because his storytelling ability, his flow switches, the beat changes, and how he's able to adapt to them. He's just talented. He is extremely talented. But with this EP, although it was only 6 songs, so that's all I had to go off of, it wasn't that good. I know that rap artists can take like the pop route and make some of their songs more poppy sounding, but for him, I just feel like half of this EP was just forgettable or passable. It was decent, but the other half I actually enjoyed quite a lot. But the other half was just, it's not bad. It's not like, oh, these songs are horrendous. It's just decent. It's just passable. So that's why I give this a 7 out of 10. Next is It Is What It Is by Thundercat. Now, I have not actually listened to a Thundercat album all the way through before, mainly just because the kind of music that he makes isn't normally the music that I listen to on a regular basis. So I find it kind of difficult to just sit down and listen to an entire album of that kind of music. But this one was pretty good. Had some really good features on it, and it makes me want to go back and listen to Thundercat's other albums. Next, we have Dedicated Side B by Carly Rae Jepsen. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. And I believe that Carly Rae Jepsen is severely underrated. I think that she's actually one of the best pop artists working in the industry right now, both with her vocal range as well as her lyrics and her production choices. I believe that she will go down as one of the greats, and her just music, just atmosphere and vibe she gives off through all of her albums and EPs and everything, it's just phenomenal. It's great. And I personally cannot believe it, coming from the girl that made Call Me Maybe, which is one of my most hated songs of all time. But I truly believe that she's a phenomenal pop artist. And with this album, she put out some pretty good songs. Again, just some decent ones here and there, but for the most part, it was good. So for these next few, I'm just going to rattle through them. Just say the name of the album, who it's by, and my score, just to lessen the amount of time on this video. So Pray for Paris by Westside Gunn, I give a 7.5 out of 10. IDK and Friends 2 by IDK, I'd give a 7.5. 1,000 Gex and the Tree of Clues, I'd give a 7.5 out of 10. Legends Never Die by Juice WRLD, I'd give a 7.5 out of 10. Melee by Dogleg, I'd give an 8 out of 10. Limbo by Amine, I'd give an 8 out of 10. Music to be Murdered by Eminem, I'd give an 8 out of 10. Who is Whipped Cream by Whipped Cream, I'd give an 8 out of 10. No Pressure by Logic. Now, this is one that I actually need to talk about just a little bit. So, I am by no means a Logic fan. His past 3 albums have just been horrendous, and some of the worst rap projects that I have ever heard in my entire life. Like, just unbearable. Well, I guess 2 rap projects, and then there was Supermarket, but that's just one of the worst albums I've ever heard, period. But he was a great rapper at one time, namely for his first few projects. And when Logic announced that he was retiring from rapping, I was actually I was somewhat indifferent, just because, I didn't really listen to him on a regular basis and stuff like that. But part of me was just kind of sad, because I know that this guy had potential to like come back around and like recapture the rap skill that he had with his first few albums. So when he announced that he was making a final album, I was both terrified and excited. I was terrified because I thought to myself, oh dear God, if this is on the level of these past few rap projects, this is going to be the worst rap send-off in history. It would just tarnish his whole career. I don't feel like, if he would have ended it on a horrendous album, his career, people would not have looked back on his career in a good light, I don't think, personally. But to my surprise, it was really freaking good. No Pressure by Logic is a good album. Now, it's not great, it's not flawless. There are like, I don't know, 2 or 3 songs that I didn't care for at all. But all of the other songs just hit. They are so good. And his rapping ability, his flow, the lyrics, everything about this album, aside from those few songs, is just great. It's great. It sounds like I said, he's back to his old form. And he looped around to where he started, and he just ended it on a great note. And I'm beyond happy for him, because, I'm a dad as well. So a lot of the messages that he is speaking out about, both through the album and in interviews and such, about quitting to, just be a dad full time. Like, that's just so admirable to me, because I know how important that is. Just for me and my son, even. That's just, getting to spend time with him is the best of my days, and it's just so great. So I am so happy that he ended his career on a great note like this. Now, again, like I said, there's like 2 or 3 songs that I just did not like at all, but for the most part, great album. And even if you're not a Logic fan, because trust me, I am not, just give it a listen, at least. Just one listen through. I believe it's a very important album, and it's just a really good one as well. So the next few I'm just going to rattle through as well, because I feel like I talked about that one for a little bit too long. Good Luck Everybody by Andrew Jackson Jihad, I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. Heaven to a Tortured Mind and forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I feel very bad, but I'm going to try. Yves Tumor, I guarantee you I'm pronouncing it wrong, but yes, by him. I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. Sweet Action by Jack Harlow, I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. I Disagree by Poppy, I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. How I'm Feeling Now by Charlie XCX, I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs, I'd give an 8.5 out of 10. Flamboyant by Dorian Electra, I'd give a 9 out of 10. Keep in mind, this is the deluxe edition, just because I know that the standard edition came out in 2019, but I hadn't actually listened to the album in its full until now. And I really, really enjoyed it. Next up, we got Sawayama by Rina Sawayama, and I'd give that a 9 out of 10. And then next up, we got Ugly is Beautiful by Oliver Tree. Now, I love this man and his music. Just the transition from him being just an internet meme guy to music star is just unbelievable. And the thing that surprised me the most and actually made me love the album very dearly is just the artistry of it. It's not funny songs. It's not basic songs. These aren't a set of basic songs that you'd expect to hear from, like, you know, a pop slash rap slash rock slash punk artist. They don't sound like anything I've ever heard before for the most part. And almost every single song is great. Just absolutely phenomenal. And his singing ability, I was very surprised at, because most of the songs that he's put out, as singles at least, were rapping. And I believe that he's phenomenal at rapping. He's gotten his flows down. The production fits him very well. And I believe that he's very skilled at rapping. But the songs on here where he just sings his heart out are my favorite. There's a few specifically. Me, Myself, and I, Again and Again, and I'm Gone as an album closer. Man, it hits, and it is so freaking good. So if you haven't heard of Oliver Tree, or if you've been kind of iffy about listening to this project, I heavily suggest that you at least give it a full listen through, because it's great. It's a great album. Next up, we got 3:15:20 by Childish Gambino, and I'd give that a 9 out of 10. And a lot of people didn't seem to like this project, and it actually surprised me a lot, just because this is the most experimental Gambino has been in his music career, period. The sounds here range from noise to sounding like a children's nursery rhyme song. It's just very odd yet beautiful, because every single sound he experiments with in this album, I believe, is meaningful, and the narrative that he crafted with this album, I also believe, is just beautiful. I love this album all around. Now, it's not a flawless album, but I absolutely love it. I love it. Next up, we got After Hours by The Weeknd. And while I love The Weeknd, none of his albums are really above like a 8 for me, just because a lot of them don't seem to have an overarching narrative. And even if they do, it's just kind of convoluted and just, it doesn't work for me. And then a lot of the songs just kind of blend together like mush, because they all sound the same, production-wise at least. And it all sounds just alike. Now, don't get me wrong, he has a great voice, which is why I enjoy listening to his music. But with this album, this is the first time, in my opinion, that his voice took a backseat to the production. And that was just very exciting for me, because I've become more interested with listening to the production side of music than the vocals. Now, I believe both are equally important, but in terms of what I've been listening for recently as just a music listener in general is the production. And that's what's been pulling me in. But with this album, it's just, the production is just flawless. Every single song has a distinct sound and just crafts a story and a narrative just through the production that just blew me away. It's the same reason that I hold Astroworld by Travis Scott near and dear to my heart. Because if you took the vocals away and you just had the production, you could tell the story that was trying to be told. And that for me is just amazing, because when an artist is able to do that, it's breathtaking. And of course, the vocals, phenomenal. He always sounds good. And in this album too, he creates variation within his voice. In almost every other song, he sounds different somehow. Whether it's another vocal distortion put on his voice or something like that, he sounds distinct and different in almost every song. And it's great. And let alone Heartless off of this album is my second favorite song of the year. And that song alone is enough to make me love the album. It captures the essence of the album so well. And I truly believe that this is The Weeknd's best album. Undoubtedly, to me at least. Next up, we have RTJ4 by Run the Jewels. And I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10. I absolutely love Run the Jewels. Almost every single project they've put out is just flawless. This one, I just had, I think, 2 songs I thought were just good. Not great, but still overall phenomenal project. Almost flawless. I highly recommend giving it a listen, especially if you haven't heard of Run the Jewels. A lot of the messages that they portray through this album are very timely and are directly applied to our modern context. And it's great. Great album. Now, I'm getting into the big 3, and these are my 3 10s of the year so far. Now, all of these albums are technically ranked the same, but how I'm doing it by putting them in order is in level of enjoyment as well. Because on a technical and musical standpoint, these 3 albums are flawless. But I'm just ranking them from descending to ascending order in terms of enjoyment that I got while listening to these. Or just emotional resonance, just in general. So, first up, we have Unlocked by Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats. I'd give a 10. Perfect album. Very short, 20-something minutes long. It's so good. So good. And with this album and with Kids See Ghosts, it just proves that you do not need a conventional album runtime to tell a story, to get your point across to the listener, and to also wow the listener with musical ability. Now, Denzel Curry is my favorite rapper. He's my favorite musician, period. I believe that his lyrical and just rapping ability in general is just unmatched. And with this album, he shows it off to the max. And I believe that it's one of his best projects, period. And it's great. It's a fun, very colorful album. And it's just flawless. Next up, we have Circles by Mac Miller. And this album was one that honestly broke me. I hadn't really listened to Mac Miller before his untimely death, honestly. And I know it sounds horrible because it kind of is, but ever since he died, I had started listening to his music because it had been brought to my attention all his other fans and how they felt about his music. So when I saw that this album was coming out, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a listen. I'll see how it is. And it just blew me away on a strict emotional level. I mean, like I said, with all three of these albums, I don't need to talk about the technical ability or the production or the lyrics because it's all flawless. But this album broke me because, given the context of what had happened and just Mac Miller just reflecting on his life at the time when he was writing these songs, it's just very harrowing to hear. And I honestly bawled my eyes out when listening to this album. And I'm not afraid to say that because it's a truly harrowing experience because, like I said, given the context, these songs just gain so much weight. And it broke me because these songs and their messages about life and wondering what you're going to do and what's your worth and all of these things, it's just great. It's a great album, but it is very, very sad. And I warn you, if you're not in a good state of mind, do not listen to this album. Just saying, because it is very, very sad. It's not extremely dark or disturbing necessarily, but given the context, when we know what has happened, that's when it becomes saddening to hear. And to hear him sing about these things, it's very sad to hear. And I know it sounds kind of contradictory to say that I enjoyed listening to the album, but the reason why I enjoyed it was because I feel like some of these songs were meant to be his parting message. At least that's how I see it. And they are just, the messages and the songs are just great. And the emotional weight of this album is just unmatched. And I love this album, and it will continue to be one of my favorites of all time, along with his Swimming album. Those are two albums that I now hold very dearly, not only because of musical ability and production, but also because of the messages and the weight that they hold. Now, my favorite album of the year may come as a shock to almost everyone. I mean, I guess not really for people who don't know who this band is, but my favorite album of the year is Making a Door Less Open by Car Seat Headrest. And from what I've seen, generally, Car Seat Headrest fans do not like this album at all. And, I mean, Anthony Fantano, he reviewed this album, and I think he gave it like a 4 or 5. And he loved Car Seat Headrest's projects in the past. But for me, this is the first one that I had listened to all the way through. And the only reason I listened to it was because it popped up in my new releases on Spotify. And my brother has been listening to this band for years. And so I saw it pop up, and I was like, you know what? I'll give this a listen. And then maybe it'll make me want to go back and listen to Car Seat Headrest's other albums as well. And this album perfectly captures the emotions of our modern times, in my opinion. This album grapples with tones of loneliness, self-worth, just looking to the future in general. It's just an album reflecting on shared human emotions. And while that might sound kind of shallow on a surface level, when you listen to this album, it is so much more than that. This is the only album on my list that I can say is less of an album than a musical experience. I personally don't really come back to the album to listen to a single song anymore, because the beautiful thing about this album is that it feels like a whole, which is what I think is the beauty of albums in general. Like some of the greatest ones, like I said, Astroworld, Atrocity Exhibition, To Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City. It's because when you think of one song, then you need to think of the whole with great albums, at least in my opinion. Because that song is just a gear in the album, and it needs to turn to bring about the whole album's narrative. And each song is a little gear, and they all spin together to weave the album's narrative, and they all go together. So with this album, why I think it's just beautiful is because the album, I don't feel like songs should be, at least in my opinion, played out of context, because every single song plays a specific role in the album's meaning and the messages that the band is trying to get through. And I absolutely love this album. Every song sounds different. There's just a wide variety of things in here for everyone. And it's just, there's a little bit of pop, rock, punk, just noise music, electronic. Everything is on this album, and it works phenomenally. I absolutely adore this album, and I truly believe that it will, if it hasn't already, work its way into my top 10 favorite albums of all time. So, in summary, that's my list for albums and EPs that I've listened to this year in order from least enjoyed to greatest. I really do apologize. This video ran a lot longer than I intended, but when I start to talk about things that I'm passionate about, I lose track of time. So I do apologize, and like I said, if I keep deciding to do videos like this, I'm gonna learn how to edit and stuff like that, just because I do feel like I need to cut down on some of my talking points. But thank you guys for watching, and I really enjoyed this video, and I hope I can make more like this, maybe with an updated list here in the near future. But yeah, thank you for watching.